I'm McCreary, the composer for The Boy. Music has been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. I truly don't remember a time when I didn't want to be a musician. The other thing that was a part of my life from the beginning was film. My mom used to take me to movies when I was so small I couldn't hold the seat down. I grew up in an era where the composers who were working at that time were Elmer Bernstein, Jerry Goldsmith, Alan Silvestri. These are the kinds of guys that really understood orchestral music, and yet I also grew up loving rock and roll. And as I got older, the doors to composers coming from those areas really started to open. You could become a film composer coming from a rock band. Toward the end of my high school experience, I met Elmer Bernstein, who took me under his wing. Elmer, of course, scored the 10 Commandments, To Kill a Mockingbird, The Great Escape. He had a huge career and a huge impact. And I learned a lot from him about the art of film music and a lot about life, just what it is to be successful in life. When I graduated college, I needed work. I was essentially homeless. I was finishing up a student film, so Elmer Bernstein let me crash in his Santa Monica house for 2 months. At that time, I got a chance to work for Richard Gibbs as an assistant. Richard is a composer at this time who's doing a lot of film. After I've been working for him for about a year and a half, he is hired on to do the pilot miniseries of a show called Battlestar Galactica. That miniseries blossoms into a series, and I'm given the chance to take over from Richard, who is going off to do more features. And I move into television. I did The Walking Dead, Terminator: The Sarah Connor Chronicles, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. There's been an interest from the film community in seeing that work applied on the bigger screen, and that's been very exciting to me because that's the medium that inspired me growing up. So I get a call last summer from my agent about this film, The Boy, at Lakeshore. And I get to go into Lakeshore offices and watch it, and I know very little about it. I knew it was about a doll, I guess. So the movie starts, and the first 15 minutes absolutely hook me. The opening drive up to the house is so moody and gothic, but the character Greta is so modern. She's relatable. I really feel like she is somebody I can relate to who's put into a world that I've never seen. So when the lights come up, I knew one thing: I had to be involved in this movie. I brought in a group of about 40 strings and a string quartet. And I experimented with using a solo piano, a medium-sized string group, and a string quartet to dial in a rich sound. And I did it just as a proof of concept, just to see if it would work, to see if the producers responded. I didn't even have the job yet. I think ultimately that was probably part of the decision in bringing me on, because it showed there was a way to make that work. The interesting thing about the film is it's not a horror film, it's a character study. It's a relationship film. It's a relationship between a woman and a doll, but it's a relationship. That is the arc of the film. As such, I felt that it needed a warm, rich lyrical score, and the producers clearly felt the same way. The first thing I tackled when I wrote the score to The Boy was the beginning scene and the end. So the beginning I explored during the proof of concept. I worked closely with Brent and everybody at Lakeshore to dial in that sound. When she drives up to the house, we have to set the right tone. The end, similarly, has to have a tone, but it's entirely different. All of the emotional threads, the psychological thriller, it all gives way to this nightmare. And in fact, the last 12 minutes of this score are among the most intense action music I've ever written in my life. So ultimately, there's this emotional arc that the film takes, and the score supports it in that journey. But it's interesting because if you listen on the soundtrack, you listen to track 1 and you listen to the last track, you wouldn't even believe they're from the same movie. I was playing some of the final masters for this soundtrack album for my brother Brendan, and he was starting to ask me questions about if I was going to use more electronics and maybe use some darker beats. And I remember saying, well, the movie's done. I mean, we're out the door, man. But that would be cool. That was a cool idea. And I encouraged him to just try it. If he was hearing something, what would that sound like with a darker, edgier, more electronic tone? I was really curious to see what he would come up with. When I heard In My Dream the first time, I couldn't believe how compelling it was. I felt that this was something that should be a part of the soundtrack album.
My name is Brendan McCreary, and I wrote the song In My Dream for the boy. The way I started was listening to various cues that Bear had sent. And I threw every track into Pro Tools, and at any time that something caught my ear, I'd just be like, cut it out. Just grab it, grab it, grab it, grab it, grab it. And one of the things that happens when you have all these separate samples or sections of a piece of music or a cue, they're all in different time signatures. They're all like very different timbres and tones, but that's the moment when it's also kind of the most fun. Because the cool thing about sample-based music is you're kind of creating an audio Lego set for yourself. The way I produce and write songs is very much kind of by the seat of my pants. I met Fife Monroe, who is an extremely talented vocalist and singer. When it came time to do In My Dream, I automatically knew I need Fife to come in and do this, and she knocked it out of the park. She can sing so wistfully and vulnerably, but still have so much power at the same time. It would just end up being like a really cool counterpoint.